Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major! Hello and welcome to another episode of Almost Major, where we talk about the many major studios and the films they release. Today we are talking about House of a Thousand Corpses from 2003. We are currently going through Lionsgate films from 1998 to 2005. My name is Kevin Tudor. I'm here with Bryden Doyle.
Hello.
And Charlie Nash.
Hello.
We have a super special guest today, a film writer by the name of Scout Tafoya. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yes.
Of course.
I forget how, because like we were saying, and this is how I was only going to do House of a Thousand because Devil's Rejects has soured in my brain so much, but we will get into that. And I don't know, Charlie fought to have Devil's Rejects, and I said, that's fine. You know what? People deserve to have nice things. And then I think it was Charlie
that for the people.
Yes, and I don't know. I'm pretty sure, Charlie, you said that Scout Tafoya has to be on for these.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I was like, yeah, probably that makes sense.
Honored.
Yes. Like we were saying, House of a Thousand Corpses, 2003. It opened April 11th, 2003 at number 7 in 595 theaters and maxed out at 847 theaters. The budget, there's some discrepancy on this. The film's starting budget was $3 to $4 million, though its final budget is debatable. Zombie first claimed that the film was made solely with the initial $4 million, but later described a budget between $7 million and $14 million. And on the director's commentary in the 3-hour doc for Devil's Rejects, Zombie said something that like Devil's Rejects had nowhere near the budget of House of a Thousand, and both of them say $7 million. So I'm gonna assume that House of a Thousand was probably about 3 or 4 because. The ending, once everything was done, the ending just didn't work. So he like made the ending the best way he could, and then Universal was like, yeah, this ending's bad, here's some more money. And the ending still doesn't feel like fully done. It feels like a mess.
Well, there's a question mark at the end. That's
yeah, that's what they were. They were just like, I don't know. Here's some more money. Add a question mark at the end of
Did
it.
he intentionally... I read somewhere that he potentially... I read somewhere that he might have tanked it on purpose to get more money. Is that the case?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It was just like, we're not going to be able to get the ending that's right, but so I'm going to put it together the best way I can and see if they give me money, and they did.
What was the original ending? Do you know, like, if there was, like, something... Did he specify what it was? Like,
I don't think so.
Dr. Satan's mom's name was Martha.
That's right. That's right. I think it was more so just, like, he couldn't shoot some stuff, so it's, like, very obviously felt like the ending of The Snowman, where you're just like, you did not finish this properly. I listened to the commentary, and I listened to and read a bunch of stuff, and he never really specified, just like how he's never really specified what was cut out of House of a Thousand, because allegedly it was like 105 minutes long, and now it's like 89 minutes. But I have the trivia facts for that as well. Opening weekend, $3.4 million, domestic gross of 12.6, and an overall gross of 17 million. Once again, this is 3 movies in a row. This is nominated for 3 Fangoria Chainsaw Awards. Best Wide Release Film, Best Makeup/Character FX, and also nominated for Worst Film. It won Best Supporting Actor for Sid Haig and Best Supporting Actress for Karen Black. Top 5 films this weekend. This might be the worst. Anger Management, Phone Booth, which I do want to rewatch. I do want to rewatch Phone Booth.
Yeah, Phone Booth is Larry Cohen,
Yeah.
and Joel Schumacher.
Yeah, I do want to rewatch that. Never mind, because next one is What a Girl Wants. Bringing Down the House, which I swear to God, we've done like this past like these like 3 months area of the early 2003s, because we've talked about Bringing Down the House a few times, and A Man Apart.
Oh, that was so good.
Sure. Back when Vin Diesel was playing other guys.
Yeah. And Puddle of Mud was in movie trailers.
Oh my god.
What?
Sure.
Yeah, it's
what song?
Blurry.
Yeah, it was blurry.
Yes!
It was blurry.
Yes!
I remember I saw a trailer for Man Apart when I saw Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. Like that, it was one of those.
Because they're both New Line movies.
It was one of those spring
weird.
releases. Yeah, and I remember that. Yeah, very vividly, the Puddle of Mud song being in there. But Bringing Down the House, talk about a movie that made so much money back like 20 years ago.
Much.
And you think
An
about it
insane
now.
phenomenon.
Yeah, and you think about it now, and it's just like, like, oh my fucking god.
Yeah, like if they put a movie with Steve Martin and Queen Latifah on Hulu, people would just be like, huh. But back then it was just like $300 million. This is fucking peak comedy.
Well, I mean, in fairness, it was just such a rich premise. You know, what if a black woman and a white man had a thing?
Oh,
And they actually don't.
and they actually
'Cause
don't.
at the
Yeah,
end
I
of it,
mean,
they're just like, we're better as friends, actually. I can't do
Like,
this.
the movie basically
just so-
assumes that, oh, we don't want you to want them to get together as soon as you see it's Queen Latifah, which is fucked up in its own way. Like,
Yeah, but
Well, I mean, you know.
she does get together with
Yeah.
Eugene Levy, who has the trailer line, "You got me straight tripping, boo." So
That's a line for the ages right there.
He also, I believe he says he wants to spread her on a cracker at one point.
oh,
yeah.
Jesus Christ.
yikes.
Sorry, you guys don't like comedy.
Oh, and doesn't the rich old white lady have a dog named William Shakespeare that she
William
has
Shakespeare.
with like the dog has like a collar around its neck? Like,
Yeah, it's very funny. There's a lot
I'm
of
laughing already.
There's a lot of shots of just the dog
and-
reacting to things.
and I don't mean regular dog collar. I mean like the Shakespearean whatever the fuck that.
Of
thing
course,
is.
yeah, no, the good
That's
collar
fucking
from the famous
hilarious.
portraits. Like headless Dave Foley in that New Kids in the Hall sketch.
Number one song in the U.S. this week, once again, is "Into Club" by 50 Cent. Number
Hell
one
yeah.
song in Canada this week is "I Drove All Night" by Celine Dion.
Don't know it. I'm a bad
I
Canadian.
don't know.
I'm a bad.
Oh,
gay.
come on.
I don't know that one. I'm a bad gay. So there you go.
Wow. It lasted, I think it was like 7 weeks at number one.
Wow.
And then I'm pretty sure like American Idol's season 4 finaleist had like another 4 weeks in Canada. House of a Thousand Corpses follows two young couples traveling across the backwoods of Texas searching for urban legends of murder that end up as prisoners of a bizarre and sadistic backwater family of serial killers. Written and directed by Robert Zombie. This is his first feature film. Prior to this, lead singer of White Zombie and a solo artist. Also directed a few music videos before this. After this, the sequel, Devil's Rejects in 2005, which we will maybe covers at some time. Who knows? Halloween remake in 2007 and its subsequent sequel in 2009. Starring Sid Haig as Captain Spaulding. Prior to this, Spider Baby in 1968, which is a huge influence on this, I would say, and about 5 other films with director Jack Hill. I didn't know that the role of Marcellus Wallace in Pulp Fiction was offered to him, but he, I forget how he wasn't able to get it or whatever, but as Mia Copa, he appears as the judge in Jackie Brown. After, he's almost in every Rob Zombie movie after this, besides Halloween 2 and 31, and plus Kill Bill Volume 2 in 2004. Bill Moseley as Otis Driftwood prior to this, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 in 1986, the remake of Night of the Living Dead in 1990, after this Repo, the Genetic Opera in 2008, Texas Chainsaw 3D in 2013, and of course the other 2 Firefly movies. Sherry Moon Zombie as Baby, this is her first film, and after this, every Rob Zombie movie, and the only thing she's been involved in without his involvement is the remake of Toolbox Murders in 2004, which Angela Beatis is also in, which we covered last week. And finally, Karen Black as Mother Firefly, prior nominated for an Oscar for 5 Easy Pieces in 1970, Nashville in 1975, Invaders from Mars in 1986, and Mirror Mirror in 1990. After this, really nothing I've ever heard of, and I can go ahead and say the trivia is she, well, I guess it's the trivia for Devil's Rejects, but she wanted more money for Devil's Rejects, and they couldn't afford it, so they had to recast her. I don't think there was any bad feelings. They were just like, ooh, we don't have the money, fam. Also starring Walter Goggins, Chris Hardwick, and Rainn Wilson. You were applauding for Chris Hardwick, weren't you, Brian?
No, bad timing.
Points.
Walton Goggins, love him. Just like great playing like sort of irritable, cocky dickheads early on in his career. And there was another actor. Oh, it's also funny that the cop is played by Tom Tolles, who's Michael Rooker's
From
serial
Henry.
killer buddy in Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. It's like, well, that's not reassuring. To have him
Who's
be-
named Otis
Yeah.
as well.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's wild. That's so funny.
Yep.
I completely forgot that Walton Goggins was in this movie because the last time I watched it, I didn't know who he was, and I felt so bad that I was just like, "Oh shit, yeah, he's the deputy."
Yeah.
What's up?
He's gonna get shot in slow-mo for 5 minutes.
What is up with I mean, obviously, word hadn't got out yet, but I completely forgot Chris Hardwick was in this movie, too. Also completely forgot, when I rewatched Halloween 2, the director's cut last week, that he was in that too. So,
Yeah.
I was looking for Rob Zombie, like, podcasts and interviews. He's been on Hardwick's podcast, like, 9 fucking times. Like, one time with Sherry Moon, like, so many times. And I'm just like, yeah, well...
Is that thing still going?
I assume. I mean, when all that shit came out, he was dropped, and then they, like, quote unquote did an investigation, and then everything was back to normal.
He's still hosting like those AMC after talk shows or whatever with like about like fucking Walking Dead or whatever, right? Isn't he still doing that?
Is he really still doing that?
Yeah,
let me verify.
Who else are they gonna get?
Yeah,
because once they dropped him and brought him back, I was just like, is there nobody else that can be like, so Walking Dead, how was that? Like, really?
Gosh, what happened this week? Same thing as last week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's great.
Still ongoing.
We'll be back in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Still ongoing.
What, Brian?
It's still ongoing. I just checked now. They had their looks like they had like a 9th season back in like 2021. So yeah.
Oh wow.
Radical.
Wow.
I mean, hey, you can't keep raw talent down.
God.
I remember I first saw him. I mean, probably in this, but I didn't know. But he was on a. I forget what his like segment thing was on Attack of the Show on G4 back in the day, but I remember he would be on like weekly. I remember that, and I was just like, I don't like this guy.
We're gonna look back on like nerd culture from like 2003 until 2017,
22,
like we do like serial killer crime scene photographs. There's just nothing redeeming about that whole period where it's like, hey, good news, we got a pretty girl here. We're going to make her splash around in some mud, then we're going to throw shit at her, and then she can regret having gone to college.
Oh, God.
Then we'll be back on Attack of the Show.
That's right. Coming up next, a review of fucking, Command and Conquer or whatever we do.
At Midnight is at least not going on, right? That show's done, right?
That was another one. It's a shame it's
Comedy
off the
Central,
air. It's
right?
so funny. Yeah, that was Comedy Central.
Comedy Central has nothing anymore. They just quit trying.
Are they also just showing ridiculously like MTV?
Oof.
People think that's a meme where there's just like 17 hours of that's real.
I know it's real on MTV because I've occasionally been in a hotel room in the last 3 years and it'll show up.
It's like it's either this or Pawn Stars. What do you want? Okay.
Yeah, right.
I think the last time I was in a hotel room, I found the Jodi Arias film that Lifetime made.
Hell yes, hell yes.
And
somebody was in that, wasn't it? Like that had a big name actor.
I don't remember who it was, but it was Jodi Arias. The scene I saw was Jodi Arias stalking her soon-to-be murdered ex-boyfriend, and Bring Me to Life by Evanescence was playing while she was snapping photographs.
Oh my god, I saw that.
How did they afford that?
I don't see anybody famous, but I do remember seeing that clip on Twitter.
It is directed by a guy who is like a sex offender too, Jace Alexander.
Oh my god, really? Ugh.
What?
I didn't know that.
From Seinfeld?
No,
Jace Alexander.
No. Son of Jane Alexander, interestingly enough.
Jane Alexander, of course, yes.
Yeah.
Like he got 10 years probation for like CP, like shit.
Yeah.
That's fine.
The director of the Jodi Arias movie? How old is this movie? I thought it was new.
Like 2013, but I think it was only like a couple years later that he got like arrested for it, and then but yeah, no, he was like a prominent TV director, and he like acted in some John Sayles movies. It's fucking weird.
What the fuck?
Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow. Anyways, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, Jodi Arias. No. Trivia. The idea initially came from when Zombie was creating an attraction at Universal Studios in 1999. They asked if he had any film ideas, and he basically created the rough idea of corpses on the spot. Quote, they liked it. I went home, wrote a 12-page treatment, and 2 months later we were shooting, end quote. Production on the film began in May 2000 and finished in Halloween 2000. After it was finished, Universal... I didn't write this down, but I remember they did a test screening, and then like the head of Universal called him the next day and was like, we need to talk. And Universal refused to release it, believing they would get an NC-17, even though they had already had a teaser trailer for it in theaters at the time. So that's odd. MGM later got involved to release it until Zombie, just wait for this, until Zombie said on MTV while interviewing Ben Affleck that MGM was going to release it after Universal wouldn't because MGM doesn't have any morals over there, and they apparently got so fucking pissed off and locked them out of the editing bay. Like the next day, they got locked out. And then I think Rob Zombie pretty much eventually got to the point where the money that it would take to just buy the movie got cheap enough, so he just bought it. And then in 2003, Lionsgate put it out. They got it down to an R rating. All the cutout material wasn't able to be put on the DVD as it had been quote unquote lost after MGM kicked them out. So we're probably never ever going to get a unrated or whatever version. Ironically, Universal made House of a Thousand Corpses into a haunted house for Universal's Halloween Horror Nights in 2010 and 2019.
Wow.
Rob Zombie has said that he was constantly shooting 2 versions of the gorier scenes to appease Universal, and and most of the cutaway scenes that like look super 16 millimeter because they were filmed in Rob Zombie's basement. After filming wrapped, he would invite cast members over to his house on the weekends and shoot the footage himself. With the exception of the shot of the setting sun, he created the opening credits the same way, which those opening credits kick ass. Okay. All trivia, we're going to go to...
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
Did any of you, and I will say, because I did listen to a lot of Rob Zombie's music back in the day. Did any of you love his music? Because I was about... When Hellbilly Deluxe came out, I was about 7. I didn't get into his music around 10, and even my parents were like, okay, here's the edited versions of that. And Sinister Urge was an album that came out in 2001, again, edited version, but the only track I couldn't listen to without getting scared was the last one, which is House of a Thousand Corpses, because it starts off with a bunch of fake news footage, and 10-year-old me couldn't handle it. So of course, like, before this, I like avoided this movie when I was a kid and it came out. But I was curious, like, we're all familiar with him as a filmmaker. What's everyone's relationship to him as a musical artist beforehand?
I was definitely listening to him back in the day, of course. I'm pretty sure my brother had Hellbilly Deluxe and all of that. I went back and listened to that recently, and it's fine. It's definitely like a front-loaded ass album because you have like Super Beast and Dragula and Living Dead Girl back to back to back to back. Yeah. And then by the end of it, I was just like, he kind of is running out of ideas. I was listening to a podcast where it was just like, they were just like, yeah, it's not that bad, but it's like every song on here is just like the same guitar noise, and then it's a random movie clip where it's just like, I can't believe he's dead.
But I like that playfulness and everything on like the album. Like it is like very moody and, you know, dealing with like horror stuff, but like I feel like there is like he's having fun with it, and I don't know.
I was also curious, Kevin, because I know you love nu metal, and that's kind of around the time that, but like nu metal was so like grim, and while this is dark and stuff like that, it has that playfulness that his movies have in a certain way that I think separates it from a lot of other artists at that time. I also remember, it's just coming back to me now, I also had the album American Music to Strip By, which was like a remix.
The remix.
Of all the Hellbilly Deluxe stuff, but I bought the Walmart version, which was just American Music, or whatever. It had like a photoshopped Sherry Moon Zombie with like a bra on.
I gotta check this out.
As opposed to, like...
That rules.
Yeah.
I wasn't buying his albums or anything, but because he was everywhere and I used to buy soundtracks all the time, Rob Zombie was always sort of in rotation.
Yes.
And it was one of those things where, like, I understood that it was kind of heavier than a lot of the stuff that I was listening to, with the possible exception, I guess, of, like, Rage Against the Machine, who I loved from a very, very young age. You know, it was still, like, it was easily understood, that music. It sort of followed traditional patterns and all that, and, you know, even though he was screaming, he wasn't screaming in a Cannibal Corpse way. And it was always just like, yeah, this is good, and it makes sense and all that. You know, obviously the scene from The Matrix and all that, you know, it was...
Yeah. He wrote so many... It was... Oh, sorry, Scout. Yeah.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say, it's... I got more into White Zombie than I ever did into Rob Zombie solo stuff, because I love all the early New York no-wave stuff that White Zombie was writing back when they were kind of like a true punk band instead of the kind of horrorcore thing that they would do later. And like everybody knows More Human Than Human, that was a big hit. But yeah, a lot of good stuff on those early White Zombie records. There was a Numero group put out a big reissue of all of their early hits, or all the early records rather, a couple of years ago with like a big booklet and everything. It was a beautiful edition. I wish I had bought it, but it was like $150 or something, and I didn't have it. but very, very cool.
I can't find this fucking cover, Charlie, but I remember the edited version.
Yeah.
I do.
I mean, I don't have it anymore, but, like, yeah, I specifically remember that. But you're right, Scout. I bought, like, I had terrible taste in music as a kid, so I bought, like, a ton of motion picture soundtracks. But, like, Rob Zombie was always on one with an original song that was, like, never really fitting the tone of the movie itself. It was so clearly a Rob Zombie one. He had one on the Matrix Reloaded soundtrack called Reload. He had one on the Daredevil soundtrack, I think, called The Man Without Fear, which they did use in the movie.
With Drowning Pool.
With Drowning Pool when they kill Electra's dad. Oh, God. All my 12-year-old shit is coming back to me now.
This actually came up recently in one of our group chats where we, I think it was our friend Clay Williams, co-host of X-Ain't Through 2010s, who was asking about, like, I think he cited, like, the example of, like, Vince Staples having, like, 3 songs on soundtracks in, like, a year or whatever. And are there any other artists that, like, have accomplished that? And I looked it up, and I thought, like, Rob Zombie, like, he's in a lot of soundtracks. And I found in 1996 he had original songs for Escape from L.A., the Crow sequel, I don't remember what the subtitle is, and then
City of Angels,
that one, and then Beavis and Butthead Do America.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, that's an eclectic group. And then I think Clay responded, like, he likes the thing, but then he said also, I don't think those movies are quite at the same status of the movies that I was mentioning before, but, like, I still thought it was a cool example.
Disrespect to Beavis and Butthead, but okay.
I was gonna say that was kind of a big deal. That's all of them were, frankly. I mean, like, Escape from LA got bad reviews, but that was like a big release.
Oh yeah, the money shows for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and all of those soundtracks, that was back when, like, soundtracks went platinum and were a huge deal. And all of those soundtracks that Vince Staples was on, nobody's
and then
nobody gives a fucking shit.
And then occasionally there would even be one that he, like, already wrote that, like, some, movie would be like, can this be on our soundtrack? Like, I'm pretty sure Scum of the Earth was on the Mission Impossible 2 soundtrack, which does not fit Mission Impossible 2 at all. And
so I guess you don't think DeGray Scott is the scum of the earth in that movie? All right.
I mean, that soundtrack also has Limp Bizkit and Metallica, so I don't know.
Oh my god, yeah. But that's kind of hysterical to think about that. Like, you think Mission Impossible 2, and I love the John Woo-ness of that movie in general, but, like, yeah, it was Metallica. Like, didn't Metallica write an original song for that movie?
I Disappear.
They did. It was Disappear.
I Disappear.
It was I Disappear.
As soon as I belong, it's the time I disappear.
Loved that song as a kid. Still kind of like it.
Which is funny, because that song, when that was on Napster, that's what Metallica was just like, oh, why the fuck is this song on Napster? And that's what started their entire... really just fucking Lars, but yeah.
Yeah. And I also just have to say, I kind of love no matter how many soundtracks he was on, like, Rob Zombie didn't compromise his sound, like, regardless of what you think of his music, he was always doing a Rob Zombie song, and whether or not it fit the tone of the movie or not, he's just like, I'm gonna fucking do what I want to do. I don't care.
Yeah, I think ultimately it was dealing with record companies and film executives' expectations throughout the 90s kind of trained him to deal with film companies when he was making his own art, that he was aware that as long as you essentially never waver or blink, you'll get away with it. And, once he got over the hurdle of House of a Thousand Corpses, that was true, basically, that he kept making movies exactly the way that he wanted to, and now, like, weirdly, it kind of worked out for him. Obviously, he still has trouble with financing, but it's, if they tell him, like, listen, we can't make this movie the way that it is today, he's like, all right, that's fine, I'll have a script for you in the morning. Like, he'll just fucking do it and plow through it. And I find it very funny that we're, like, writing this from the vantage point of seeing Monsters become, like, an incredibly popular film on Netflix despite a mostly bad reception critically, and from, that rarefied, wonderful group, The Fans. But, like, it was the movie that seemed like, on paper, like it was going to be his biggest flop yet, and it seems to be doing perfectly well.
Yeah.
He's going to get a lot of jobs from that, is the thing.
I hope so.
Yeah. I just need to... Bryden, I'm pretty sure you had never really listened to him, but you listened to Hellbilly Deluxe
like
last
I'd
week.
heard some of his songs in movies before. Like I watched Idle Hands last year when, like, there's a whole set piece that's Dracula where, like, you stab with the knitting needles, and then I listened to Hellbilly Deluxe as sort of, like, extracurricular research just to sort of get a sense of his sound, and really likes that. And then I was also gonna say I had not seen one of his movies until, like, this month as, like, sort of research and talking about these movies on the podcast, but I had also been aware of him as, like, I was aware of his reputation, but also he was one of the commentators on Bravo's Scariest Movie Moments, which has been revived by Shudder now. And he like talked about movies like Audition, where he said like, I don't really get freaked out by horror movies, but when I was watching this movie, it freaked me out and everything. And I kind of liked like his sort of down to earth vibe, and talking about like Last House on the Left, and talking about how that was like a Vietnam allegory. And that was an interesting way that I hadn't considered that movie, which I just heard about being shocking.
That he was the person, because I watched that show all the time as a teenager whenever it was on reruns, especially around October of whatever year it was. And I do remember that clip of Audition where I was like, wait, this movie scared Rob Zombie? Oh, I gotta see this. Like, and then he was
great.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
He was a great talking head on those things, because he came across, and that was my first exposure to him just as a guy. I was like, oh, you're just like a normal dude, and
he's
you're
a cool guy.
Yeah, he's just like very well spoken, and I was like, oh, okay, you're like okay, I see now you can do the incredible outre horror stuff all the time because you're just a regular guy the rest of the time, and this is like a costume you put on, which makes perfect sense. But I remember him talking about Dawn of the Dead, which was like it's still like one of his favorite movies, and he was saying that when he saw it, he said, for this one, George Romero put it in color, which I don't know if it made it scarier, but I guess it made it bloodier.
Hell yeah, dude.
I also vaguely remember, I'm pretty sure they had one clip of Sherry Moon Zombie on the segment for Hellraiser, and the only thing that they showed was her going, Clive Barker's a freak, and then it would just cut to somebody else.
She is. I listened to the Devil's Rejects commentary, where it's just the cast commentary, and you could tell like all three of them are just like, were you on set at this time? Yeah, I was. Yeah, okay. I mean, it was kind of fun, but she's not a horror movie person, and like while they were watching, she's like, I can't watch this scene, like stuff like that.
Wow.
So yeah, if she would have watched fucking Hellraiser, that would have blew her back. But yeah, funny thing is, I rewatched all the Chucky movies, and of course, Bride of Chucky has Living Dead Girl. I did not know Living Dead Girl is technically written for Bride of Chucky.
Oh.
Which it makes sense, but. Which is funny, because when the music video came out, it was used for the remake of Psycho, so I always linked it to Psycho remake.
I didn't know that either. Holy shit.
Yeah.
God damn it.
Yeah. Before we get off of his music stuff, I just gotta talk about the title of Hellbilly Deluxe 2, which is Hellbilly Deluxe 2, Noble Jackals, Penny Dreadfuls, and the Systematic Dehumanization of Cool.
He does love a prog rock album title. Very much a thing that he cannot get enough of. Which
is so funny, because like he makes like industrial rock or like groove metal and shit like that, but then in all of his movies it's just like anything on old rock radio stations.
Yes, it's Rush and Skinner, and because I mean, that's the fun contradiction of it, is that the music does look backwards to a certain degree, because obviously you can't do industrial music without tipping your hat towards Ministry and
hell yeah,
but there is absolutely this acknowledgement that everything that he was listening to on the radio as a kid is going to filter into all the art that he makes in this form or that. One of the movies of his that I think basically nobody has seen who's a fan of his films instead of his music is he directed a concert video of the Rob Zombie band playing in 2014. And it's really, really good. And I
have that downloaded. I need to watch it.
It's a lot of fun, and it's good to watch, especially in light of Three from Hell, because there's a lot of editing stuff that he practices in the music doc that he then brings back for Three from Hell. But he plays the band closes with "We're an American Band" by Grand Funk. And I'm like, okay, so the music and the movies are starting to bleed together here a little bit, where you're taking what would have been a soundtrack cut for you and you're putting it into your set list instead of putting it into the film.
I will say, this is not like a good or bad thing, but it was funny watching his Halloween remake, which has like a lot of 70s cuts, like Kiss and Nazareth and everything. But like then the movie like flashes forward like 15 years later. It's like they're using cell phones. I'm thinking, wait, when is Michael Myers growing up? I'm not like entirely sure. I guess he's just listening to old records or whatever. But I was like thinking, I was a little bit confused about like when this is all taking place. But like it was just kind of a funny thing where it's, I mean, at least with Devil's Rejects and House of Thousand Corpses, it's like, well, 70s today, it's like it's in the 70s, but it's just kind of funny that like it didn't stick through.
I think all of his movies are just kind of set in the past, you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Sometime before now is really all that matters.
I guess what I like about all of his movies, too, is they always take place in zombie-verse, regardless of their different tone. Like, you can always tell when you're watching a Rob Zombie movie, which whether or not I like the movie is one thing, but I always know when I'm watching a Rob Zombie movie, which, especially with many horror filmmakers right now, I think, is important right now. That he's,
agree.
You know, like
any 10 seconds of any of those movies, you know exactly who you're watching.
Yeah.
It's, you know, old school filmmaker, just like, you know, he's going to do things exactly his way. And it's like, you know, maybe that isn't the most important thing when you're trying to come up with a film that is like truly, you know, great and stands the test of time or whatever. But for somebody like me, it is, because I need to know that you actually give a shit about how the film looks. And if you've gone out of your way to do, I mean, you know, and this is the only time that anybody will make this comparison, but Terrence Davies' new one just hit Hulu, and you know, Terrence Davies movies,
oh my god, the best film of the year so far. Fucking love Benediction.
It's so fucking good. Yeah, that was my number like 2 last year after West Side Story. Love that fucking movie. Benediction's so good.
I cried in the theater through the end credits, then I collected myself, I walked to my car, and then I started crying again. Like, also, is this the only podcast that is centered around Rob Zombie that then will segue into Terrence Davies?
That's what the people listen for.
That's why you had me on.
I love it. Yeah, love it.
It looks like one last thing. In 2000, Rob Zombie was on 7 different soundtracks. 2 video games, I believe. Nightmare Creatures 2, Jet Set Radio, and also Madden 2001. So he was doing shit, man. But yeah, on the topic of the movie, how the title track "House of a Thousand Corpses" is my favorite from him because it's just so fucking creepy. It's so good. Mm-hmm. It's like anything. If I was just like, if somebody was like, what does Rob Zombie sound like? I would be like, listen to that. Don't listen to his cover of Brick House, but listen to that.
I do kind of like that cover. It's maybe the wrong. I don't like that being that sort of note you end on, tonally speaking, for the movie. Like, I feel like it doesn't quite sit well with me, but like, it's like as a cover as itself, I think it's pretty fun.
Howdy, folks. You like blood, violence, freaks of nature?
On a stormy Halloween night, 4 young people set out across the back roads of America.
What's that? It's a hitchhiker.
What, should we stop?
We can't leave her out here in the rain.
In search of a mysterious figure known only as
Dr. Satan. You know anything about the legend of Dr. Satan?
Yeah, I can show you.
Dr. Satan! Ah, Dr. Satan!
What they uncovered
You ain't seen nothing yet.
is the most horrifying and shocking tale of carnage ever seen.
Well, I bet you'd stick your head in the fire if I told you could see hell.
You seen this girl?
Yeah, they want to play Nancy Drew with this local legend that people call Dr. Satan.
Stupid kids probably got themselves lost.
Let's get out of this nut house.
The boogeyman is real. And you found him. It's showtime!
Please don't kill us.
From director Rob Zombie comes a journey into hell.
This can't be real. This can't be real. This can't be real.
House of a Thousand Corpses.
Hope you like what you see!
Okay, initial thoughts. Everybody here has seen this before besides Bryden, so I want to start with you on initial thoughts, Bryden.
Yeah, I had never seen this before. I think it's pretty good. I'm maybe a little reserved in my in liking it. I think it's because I was kind of blown away by the Halloween remakes, which I watched just a couple of weeks ago as like sort of extracurricular research. I think I was really kind of struck by the sincerity of those movies, even as they're like sadistically violent. And it is interesting seeing how like this feels like he's like testing stuff out that he will do not necessarily better, but he'll like sort of double down on in his later movies. I mean, there's the scene where like the dad gets shot in this, and then like it cuts to like home movie footage of like a Christmas holiday with his daughter and everything, and really kind of finding like that sort of trying to develop that interiority of like a character and everything, and also like really considering their emotional state as like they experience their last moments of life. I think that's really interesting to see, and also like the sort of collision between like mediated images of violence and actual violence that people are encountering. I mean, there's like always like kind of between like news footage and like also, you know, talking about like, you know, this isn't real, this isn't happening and everything. And that I think that's actually like pretty emotionally relatable when you're like in a horrible situation. But then like even in like Halloween and everything, there's like a scene where like Michael Myers, he's like I think, is it like William Forsythe is like watching like maybe like Night of the Living Dead or maybe like some other horror movie, but like, and then like that being on the screen, and it's like sort of the horror on the TV screen is like not far from like, you know, what's going on like in real life and everything. So I find that really interesting to watch him like grow as a filmmaker and double down on that stuff. It is interesting to watch this, and I feel like it's a lot more like overtly stylized than like some of his other movies, like especially with like some of the like the neon lighting and then everything. Whereas I feel like Devil's Rejects, it's like really like getting kind of the arid, like dusty textures of like sort of like the roadside towns and everything. And I don't know, it's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just interesting to see the contrast and how he sort of changes a little bit. I feel like this one, I like it quite a bit, and I think, but like I feel like sort of with this one, tonally speaking, I don't quite gel with it, especially because I feel like sometimes I feel like with the sort of contrast between like sort of the what's real and not real in terms of like the violence, I feel like sometimes it comes off as like ironic distancing, and like he's maybe not taking the material always too seriously. Like I feel like it's not always appropriate. Like there's a bit where I think it's Sherry Moon Zombie saying like, oh, or our brother Otis is like upstairs playing, and then it cuts to like him like assaulting a woman, and then it cuts back, and it's like, I don't know if like that dramatic irony, it feels almost like a comedy cut, and like it doesn't entirely sit well with me. And then stuff with like Brick House playing on like the soundtrack, like during a torture scene, I feel like, and you know, ironic, you know, needle drops like that, those like that is a thing that he does later in the movies and everything. But even in Devil's Rejects, I feel like when he plays like Freebird, which is not exactly the movie
that is so genuine.
So exactly,
genuine.
This is
one of the best moments in film. Full
stop.
Yes.
It's beautiful. I feel like when he like gets those unexpected needle drops and everything that you wouldn't expect, I feel like it is more germane emotionally, and also like, yeah, like I believe that these characters would be listening to it. But then I guess, I mean, if I'm being generous in the movie, I guess it's also like them drowning out, like the characters themselves are playing the music to sort of drown out like the misery of the characters that they're torturing and everything. Like they're not taking it seriously. And then also, I guess the other thing too is what's interesting in the movie is like what characters see on TV or read in the news, but like, you know, oh, the Manson girls are kind of hot, or like in Devil's Rejects when they're watching the stuff about like Satanism, it's like, oh, I don't know if this is like actually real or whatever. And then like sort of like having the pop music play over like soundtracks of like soundtracking like really hideous violence, it's like sort of, I guess, like, all right, like, you know, you're like ignoring like what's going on underneath the surface of all this and everything, and that's sort of like that, I don't know, it's sort of like doubling down on the idea of like, you know, being distracted by all this like sort of like media consumption, like distracting you from like the horrors that exist underneath. And that's, I mean, that's something that, you know, talking about the broader scariest movie moments thing, Zombie I think talked about that with like Last House on the Left, where like, you know, when he talks about like, oh, well, the time that movie was being made, like Vietnam War was going on, but like what are you seeing on TV? Like you're seeing the footage, but then also you're hearing like, you know, Harry Nilsson on the radio and everything. It's sort of talking about how like there is like kind of like a weird discombobulation. So I don't know, like there's I can see, it's like I think of like I can see what he's doing. I don't necessarily always love it, but I don't know. It's so interesting to watch like how like he like has grown as a filmmaker, and like how he's like, you know, used these ideas throughout his whole thing and like really develop like an ethos and a style, and just be like so forceful and impact like right from the beginning. So yeah, interesting, but like, you know, I kind of like what he's done later better, so, but still cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting hearing him talk about Vietnam and putting that with Last House on the Left, because of course I like even Wes Craven has said that and whatnot, because I think it was either on the Devil's Rejects commentary with him or in an interview that I was listening to, that he was saying like, yeah, after Devil's Rejects, people were talking to me about like how this is like a response to 9/11 and whatnot. And he's like, I never really got that, but I guess so. But then in the documentary, the 30 Days from Hell, they talked about like a video that leaked from like one of the torture prisons and whatnot, and then he was just like, I guess there was a scene where maybe one of the guys that Otis is taking out to kill and whatnot, they like beheaded him, and they were just like, yeah, that was in one of the 9/11 videos, let's not do that. So it's like, you say that, but it's like, it's very much made at this time and being a response to that at the same time. But yeah, and also like you were saying, I'll just go ahead and get into my initial thoughts, as I do actually like this movie. It's very not like the rest of his movies, which I think is the reason I like it the most. Mm-hmm. It feels like a music video, because he like just got off of making music videos, and there's split screens, there's fucking freeze frames, there's slow-mo, there's fucking multiple, or there's a scene where Cherry Moon Zombie's lip syncing and there's 3 of her and there's all of it. Like, he's going absolutely nuts with this. And then of course, you know, he even said, he was just like, I didn't really like the 35 millimeter look of it and everything looks so shiny, so for the next movie I'm shooting in 16 and it's going to be, you know, as bare as possible. But it's like, I like the gross but glossiness of this movie a lot. And I don't know, I really like it. Like I said, the opening credits I fucking love, and just the uneasy zooms that he does, and he does it all the time. But yeah, I just really like it. And I feel like, because my problem mostly with Devil's Rejects is I don't really care about these characters that much, but in this one you have the added benefit of the 4 characters that are slowly being killed off, which I also don't really like, but it makes Otis and Captain Spaulding, who's barely in this movie, you always think he's in it a lot more than he actually is, and Baby, that you don't see them as often, that it feels more creepy. But then in Devil's Rejects, where you're with them the entire time, it makes you feel like either irked with, because my problem is like I don't care that they die at the end of Devil's Rejects. I just fucking don't like which when I was younger I totally did. That last scene worked on me like a motherfucker, and I'm still very 50-50 on the ending of Devil's Rejects, because I'm like, it is powerful, but at the same time it's like I don't care. But masterful directing and all of that at the end of Devil's Rejects. But regardless, yeah, I really like this movie. I like the ending makes no fucking sense. It definitely feels cobbled together. Like, there's no placement for this underground layer at all. I don't know what the fuck is going on. The reveal of Dr. Satan kicks ass. Like, I love that. Love it so much. Yeah, I don't know. I like it. I don't know what to say. But Scout, hit us with the initial thoughts.
So, it being shot in 35 millimeter is so funny to me because it has qualities in common with another movie that I'm kind of fascinated by in much the same way that I am House of a Thousand Corpses, without fully sort of rising to the level of really liking it, which is Eli Roth's Cabin Fever. Around the same time.
Yeah, we'll be talking about it soon, and I haven't seen it since it came out, so I'm very curious.
It's a fascinating thing because it fully marks the transition from what used to be acceptable in an American studio film, from scene construction and blocking and on-screen space and editing, to what it would then become in the thick of the torture porn years. I think Rob Zombie is one of my favorite filmmakers for a host of reasons, but especially because he never reveals anything in any interviews that doesn't have to do with the immediate demands of, like, okay, so then we move the camera here and we do this and all that, and even that he's frankly fairly coy about. And so it makes perfect sense to me that he would say we weren't really influenced by 9/11, and that's fine. But the thing about it is, him having the back catalog of loving Last House on the Left, loving Texas Chainsaw Massacre, loving Dawn of the Dead, is that he has as his bedrock foundation for movies. And obviously, if you go back further, he also loves Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu, because he pays homage to those in his music videos and in his movies. And those are all horror films influenced directly by war coverage. So even if we take for granted, on face value, that he's not actually a filmmaker who is thinking about the political content of a scene or whatever, he is thinking about those through osmosis, because the movies that affected him the most when he was watching them were films that came from war coverage. I mean, famously, Tom Savini, who did the effects work on all of his favorite movies growing up, was a combat photographer and came back and got into prosthetic effects. And so that stuff bleeds into, itself and each other fairly conclusively. And him going about making the most horrific things that he could think of, and I don't think he probably hasn't outdone himself for graphic violence since the days of Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects, but has since burrowed further into what it means to be at the the receiving end of heroic violence and living with terrible violence, and kind of following all that to its logical endpoint, which is essentially that you start with the actual destruction of the body with, exterior forces, in this case, unknowable serial killers with, phallic knives and all this stuff, or in the case of Baby and Mama, these are also female serial killers who undo the female victims that they're dealing with. And then you keep barreling further and further into this idea of the annihilation of the self until you are picking apart a human soul, essentially, in works like 31 and Lords of Salem and Halloween 2. And he's sort of been on the backswing ever since, that essentially he got as dark as he knew how to get, and then he kind of pulled back and has since been sort of slowly letting humanity back into these things, that even a movie like 3 from Hell, which is about these same characters who are murderous psychopaths, he allows them joy, and he allows them camaraderie, and he allows them very human, responses to things on top of their compulsion to kill. And none of that is anything that he has gone out of his way to tell us that he's doing. It's just that it's all in the work. And now we have The Munsters, which is the fucking best film of the year. Like one of the most beautiful and joyful comedies I've ever seen. I love that movie so much. But when I saw House of a Thousand Corpses, I'd seen that teaser, and I remember thinking when I saw it afterwards, being like, "Where's that fucking movie? Like, when is this movie coming out?" It took forever for that shit to get there, and then finally saw it on VHS, and it was kind of like my first reaction to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I didn't understand what the fuck I was looking at. I'm like, this is not a traditional movie. This is not scary in the way that I thought it would be scary. It's a lot of people jumping around and screaming and the crazy edits, and so I just kind of was repelled by it, but not perhaps in the way that he wanted his audience to be repelled, because he wanted you to understand the violence and then also pull away from it at the same time. And so it took me a very long time to get back on the Rob Zombie train, because I was so, kind of confused, I suppose, by the spectacle of it, because again, it looked like a normal movie until it didn't, where you're seeing the interstitials that you were talking about, the music video theory that winds up interacting with what are otherwise apparently normal scenes from horror movies. The thing, though, that really kind of stuck with me more than anything, like you were saying, is the introduction of Dr. Satan. Just the idea of, and they say it in the teaser, it's, you were talking about the devil, well, you're going to meet him, and they throw him down a hole, and there in this absurd haunted house, and he had been designing haunted houses, so he knew what they looked like better than anybody. Huge, overgrown mutants, and in the back of the cave is this awful inhuman thing doing surgery on her boyfriend, and it was just like, yeah, that's pretty insane. That's pretty wild.
It's kind of cool.
Kind of fucking cool. And I held on to that, and like really that image stayed with me. So the whole time where Devil's Rejects comes out, the Halloween remake comes out, in my head I'm like, I don't know that I can do your whole thing. And because at that point the stuff that I liked was much more obvious, whether it's the kind of art horror stuff from Alien, or like the Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead, which I was a big fan of at the time. I don't really love it now. And then finally, when Halloween 2 came out, I read Keith Phipps' review at the AV Club, and he's describing it, and he's like, he seems genuinely perplexed by his own reaction to this movie. I'm like, okay, this seems like something I should go see. And so it was Thanksgiving break, 2009. I was back home in Pennsylvania from school up here. I was getting sucked dry by the Emerson machine. Went home for Thanksgiving, drove out, saw Halloween 2, and never forgot my reaction. I was just like, okay, all right. Something else is going on here. This is not like other movies that are getting made now, certainly not in America, because it had the immediacy of found footage and the angularity and sharpness and strangeness and just screeching violence of 70s horror. And I just, like, I couldn't look away. And from that moment on, I was obsessed with Rob Zombie. And so going back to House of a Thousand Corpses afterwards, it is really cool to see essentially a filmmaker trying something for the first time, an artist trying a new medium. He had made music videos, but it's a very different thing with a very different set of expectations. And I come away feeling like it is not a wholly successful experiment. And I think ultimately, if you tied him to a chair and made him tell you that, he would probably say the same thing. But again,
about House?
Yeah, about House.
Oh, yeah. He said, like, he does not watch it, and he watched it, like, a few years ago because he was just, like, so embarrassed because he was like, I can't even watch it without thinking of all the flaws and whatnot. But, he's just like, you know what, for what it is, why not? Yeah, right. That type of thing.
And that is, I mean, I second that emotion. I think that for what it is quite impressive, because it really does contain truly harrowing things in there, sights and sounds you really don't want to see. And for a director to start with that, to show you things that, honestly, I think that they kind of break the spell of the movie, in essence, to show you, like you were saying, the kind of comedy cuts to horrible assault and all that. I don't think the film can carry that weight, but what a swing, your first thing, and you're making something that's so actively repellent in every fucking way, but also you're using it as an opportunity to give jobs to every actor you really love. The fact that there's a movie made with studio money, not a lot of studio money, but still studio money, that has top billed performances from Bill Moseley, Karen Black, Tom Towles, and Sid Haig is like, I mean, how do you not love that,
He was saying in the 30 Days in Hell documentary, because in Devil's Rejects there's fucking Ken Foree and Michael Barrymore and stuff like that, and he was just like, I don't choose them to be like, I love Hills Have Eyes, so put fucking Michael Barrymore in there. He's like, I chose them because I've seen their work and I think they're actually good. This isn't a stunt cameo. He's like, I hate watching a movie where I'm just like, you just put them in because you liked that movie or whatnot. And it's true, because Ken Foree is perfect for that role. Michael Barrymore is perfect for that role and whatnot. So he's good at casting.
He's giving opportunities to these guys, and that's the thing. It's not a stunt, because if it was a stunt, it'd be like a cameo or something like that, or it would like wink at you. But he's just giving them really meaty roles, the kinds of things that they kind of almost got in the 70s and 80s, right? Like Tom Towles in Henry Portrait is a fucking incredible performance.
Yeah, so good.
But because it was such a good performance in such a disreputable film that caused people to throw up and like boycott movies and stuff like that, it meant that he wasn't getting legitimate offers, and so he became a character actor that day. They released that movie and he became a bit player, and so Rob Zombie, one of the few filmmakers who can actually give these people roles that he knows they're up to doing. The closest thing to like a kind of a winking cameo or anything in any of his movies is probably something like the 30 seconds that Steve Railsback is in Devil's Rejects or something like that. I mean, obviously Steve Railsback is a great actor, but he's also probably hard to deal with because he's so intense. But anyway,
I was gonna say maybe PJ Souls. That's the only one
maybe
that I kind of feel.
But again, when you need a 30-second scene and you need it to make sense and you need a woman to really have an adverse reaction to a clown, why not hire somebody who can do the job?
Yeah. Charlie, finish this out. Oh
yeah.
Don't we make you fucking laugh? Yeah. Okay. Aren't we fucking funny?
I pretty much have a very similar reaction to all of you, but I did see Devil's Rejects first, which did, as a teenager, color my first impression upon watching this, because I think, and we'll get into it, I love Devil's Rejects, and I think it's much more tonally consistent and a step up in terms of filmmaking craft and just everything that he's doing as a filmmaker, and what you've all talked about in terms of like emotional power within these characters who are often sadistic psychopaths. This one... So I knew these characters from Devil's Rejects and knew their fate, and then went back and saw this, because back when this came out in 2003, I was a fucking fraidy cat, where I still wouldn't go near horror. I was like 12 years old. I don't know what.
Same.
I was renting other shit, but I remember, even though I listened to edited versions of Rob Zombie albums my parents bought me from Walmart, I was like, I'm not going near that. And so, like, I hadn't seen this movie since high school, and I remember being very disappointed by it because of how much he grew as a filmmaker from Devil's Rejects and going backwards. But watching it today, I do think, the messiness is fascinating to me in terms of, like, there's a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that he grew out of, and there's a lot of tones that, I mean, Brydon, you struck upon something that doesn't sit well with me, which is the tonal shifts between the violence and the comedy doesn't fit as well, where even in Devil's Rejects, I think, like, he mastered that, and often, we've talked about this within our group chat, and friends of ours have talked about this, but there's a certain reaction to, no matter how minor a character is, no matter whether they or not they have a line, but if they are murdered in a Rob Zombie movie, there is a sense of pain that gives them a sense of humanity that I feel is absent within this one. This one, I mean, and Scout, obviously, you wrote a book on Tobe Hooper films, but I couldn't help but think about the Funhouse watching this one, especially.
Yep.
Especially with the reveal of Dr. Satan, it all feels like Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse, and, obviously Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That was the other thing. I hadn't even seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre when I saw this or Devil's Rejects, because I was pretty much grabbing whatever horror I could immediately get my hands on in a video store, which...
That was tough. In the VHS
Yeah.
days, you had to have a good, like, independently run VHS rental place in town, otherwise you weren't going to get Texas Chainsaw or Last House.
Exactly.
Because until those things hit DVD, they were considered too weird, and they didn't want to go through the rigmarole of trying to track them down and face possible censorship. So Blockbuster and Hollywood Video and West Coast or Suncoast or one of them, they didn't really have the worst of 70s and 80s horror.
Yeah. No. So I will... Exactly. So I will say, even though I don't love this film, this and, I mean, we'll get into it in The Devil's Rejects, but Rob Zombie, even through his, homages to exploitation cinema, did kind of introduce me to exploitation cinema. And I definitely have a lot of admiration for this film, even when I don't think it works. I mean, again, I remember being a kid, especially after seeing Devil's Rejects first, which has an emotional and psychological through line all the way through, like, being a stupid teenager when the Dr. Satan stuff happened. I was like, this makes no sense. Like this doesn't even fit in with the world of the characters that I knew, which was a stupid thing because I agree with you, Kevin. Like, even though it doesn't make sense watching it now, there is a certain sense of power through the art direction and through the makeup effects of just watching this fucking guy just go to town on, this character's boyfriend. I will say, I know one criticism Rob Zombie gets a lot of the time, and I guess to a point that I was making before, is that his characters are, quote, underdeveloped, and usually I can understand where people are coming from, but I don't necessarily agree with it. This I agree, even with... And we'll get into it in the Devil's Rejects episode, but I do think every single character in the Devil's Rejects, whether or not they have one line or, how many, they're always defined, even in this very over-the-top world, as having a personality. And these victims, even though they're played by Rainn Wilson and a few other people, like, I just don't care. I just don't care about them, and I don't think... I'm not saying Zombie doesn't care about them either, but they are such stock syndrome...
Oh, he doesn't. Doesn't.
And what I think is fascinating that he grew up into the Devil's Rejects with is that the serial killers are still the most interesting characters in this film. Mm-hmm. I thought going back into this, it would be more about the victims, but really, they just fucking suck. I mean, they're just annoying.
They do.
Like, I'm sorry, but they don't, like, I understand being creeped out, but, like, I mean, it made me think that, and maybe this is the point, but yeah, like, the whole, like, you're just fucking... What does Otis say at one point to one of them? Like, you're just a fucking bunch of stuck-up middle-class, like, assholes who don't have any consideration. Where they're like, I don't want to go on a murder ride. I'm just like, okay, but you're on, like, a fucking road trip, and you're, like, here, like, just... I know it's a bad idea, but wouldn't you at least be interested? They're just so fucking whiny and obnoxious the entire time, which I guess is part of the point, and
Yes.
I know that's part of the point, but that doesn't make him interesting, whereas in later Rob Zombie films, I feel like everybody who is might end up dead has some sort of vitality to them that makes them idiosyncratic in a way that when they die, there's a loss there, which I think is another thing that horror films these days lack, especially, like, but yeah, like, I do think that it's not Zombie's best, but I do find it to be, if you are at all interested in Rob Zombie and his growth as a filmmaker, it's absolutely essential text to see how he got, to where he is today.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback off your point about, like, the not caring about the characters. I mean, he uses them, I guess, more as, like, sort of to drive home the point of, like, sort of, like, the hypocrisy of them being interested in, like, murder and, like, the exploitativeness of looking at this murder culture and everything, and all that. But, like, yeah, they're not characters. They're more just used, like, to drive home a point. Whereas I feel like in something like Halloween 2, which is also about similar, like, true crime exploitation, he is, like, looking at, like, Dr. Loomis or someone else as, like, a character and considering the ramifications of that. I will say, though, during the whole Walton Goggins, Tom Toll's murder scene, I feel like he gets at sort of, like, the hint of it and everything, where, like, I think, like, Walton Goggins says, like, oh, I'm scared of dogs. I was bit by one when I was, like, 8 years old or whatever. It's like, oh, that's an interesting... Like, Zombie's so good with, like, dialogue where he will have these unexpected moments, even for characters who are, like, jackasses or whatever, where, like, he will have, like, a moment like in Halloween where like the sister who's like really mean to Michael Myers says like, oh well, like, you know, my daddy's in heaven or whatever, and it's like, oh, that's like an unexpected moment of humanity that like you don't, that's like kind of catches you off guard and confuses you emotionally. I will say Zombie kind of kills it in House of a Thousand Corpses, where it's like 20 country music playing over like these hideous murders. I'm like, okay, I'm not entirely sure. Like, I'm kind of rolling my eyes over that.
Yeah,
but then
yeah.
I do love the moment where it's like bird's eye view, where like a crane's up and it's like
so
just like agonizingly long silence, and then it's like the gunshot and everything. It really does like send a sense of hopelessness where you're just like watching it from above, like you can't help these.
Yeah, that is the scene that I remembered most vividly from my first rewatch, and it went on even longer than I remembered upon this watch.
Which is funny because I think in some interview I was seeing, it was just like, it's so weird because nobody liked House of Thousand when it came out, and now everybody loves it. But Universal wanted me to cut that, make it so much slower, and now it's like the scene that everybody remembers. And I was just like, it's kind of right.
No, I mean it was the start of making big stylistic choices. I mean, certainly the Freebird needle drop is an extension of the theory that gives you that scene. And I think too, it's funny you talk about, you know, everybody having a personality. This is really the proper start of him understanding that he doesn't want you to forget any of the stuff that you're seeing. It doesn't matter what the scene is or any of that. He really wants it to stick with you. And I think that with Devils, he kind of doubles down on how memorably grotesque everybody is. Like, do you remember there was a great poster image of Devils that's like the Last Supper, but with all the characters, you know?
Yes.
The fucking best shit ever. Like, that's the smartest idea any ad exec has ever had.
I also like the one sheet with just the arm out of the hotel room.
Oh my god, amazing.
Incredible.
Amazing. Yeah. And that's, you know, that's the thing about horror, is that it has the potential to be extremely memorable for a host of reasons, whether or not it's because it's very specifically written in the case of Rob Zombie's movies, or if they're extremely violent like Rob Zombie's movies, or he styles them in such sort of ornate and strange ways. Like, I like how he's got Bill Moseley kind of set up in House, but when he looks just like Manson in the second one, I'm like, yeah, that's
so
how you
much
fucking
like
do
Manson.
it, man.
He feels like a completely different character from film to film, because in this one he's got like contact lenses, he's got like the white hair.
He's white.
Yeah. And
he's like albino.
Yeah.
Almost
Well,
he's still
doing Chop Top from Texas Chainsaw 2, and that's the difference.
Kind of.
Zombie has him doing an extension of that kind of gibbering sort of performance, and then by Devils, he's decided he's making a very serious. I mean, one of my favorite horror writers is a guy who goes by El Santo. He writes for 1000misspenthours.com, and he described the tonal whiplash between House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects as being as if Tobe Hooper had made Texas Chainsaw 2 first.
Oh my
and
god!
Wow, that's pretty good.
It would be very difficult to take Leatherface seriously in the same way once you had seen the first movie. You know, like once you had seen 2 ahead of 1. And that's kind of the difference between moving from House to Devils, is like, oh, these guys were nuts, but they were almost figures of fun because they were so outlandish. But also, you do that movie maybe more than anything else, because Devils having a more consistent tone means that it doesn't fall prey to this same sort of thing. House of a Thousand Corpses is a movie that genuinely you kind of feel like you're being taken hostage, because you're with the one character group, and then by the midpoint, not only have 2 of them died, one of her dads has died. The rescue operation has failed miserably, and then they go to the liquor store and they're like having fun and hanging out, and it's like, wait a minute, what about the innocent people, you know?
Yeah.
And the guy at the liquor store is so funny too, because they just keep...
I like to get fucked up too. Yeah.
Thanks,
so
Goober.
Yeah.
What does he say at the end? He's like, oh, well, thank you so much for stopping by Red Hot Pussy Liquors. Like,
That's right.
Yes.
That was the first thing they shot too, that scene.
Oh, wow. I never knew that.
Yeah. Before we get into the plot real quick.
The plot.
I mean, it's just fun to go use the plot to go by a scene basis. It's that's why you pretty much use it, especially for movies like this. It's just like, there's 4 people, and then at the end there's none.
What point a guy gets turned into a fish, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, kicks ass. But yeah, like that scene where they go to the liquor store and whatnot, which is, it doesn't feel as because something like that after everybody's killed, it's like, why do I care that they're getting liquor? They're terrible people. But in this one, it doesn't hit me as hard as in Devil's Rejects, because the violence is so much worse in Devil's Rejects that it's really hard to go back and forth, because the liquor store scene in this one is pretty much the same as the ice cream scene in Devil's Rejects.
Very much
as
so.
That scene is so funny.
Yeah.
The ice cream bit. I mean,
Oh,
it's very funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go through the plot. This will be fun. On October 30th, 1977, amateur criminals Killer Carl and Richard Wick attempt, I don't know why we needed their names, attempt an armed robbery at a gas station / horror museum, but are killed by the owner, Captain Spaulding. Later that night, Jerry, Bill, Mary, and Denise are on the road in hopes of writing a book on offbeat roadside attractions. When the four meet Spaulding, who is also the owner of the Museum of Monsters and Madmen, they learn of the local legend of Dr. Satan. As they take off in a search of the tree from which Dr. Satan was hanged, they pick up a young, free-spirited hitchhiker named Baby, who claims to live only a few miles away. Shortly after, a mysterious figure appears hidden in some overgrowth and shoots their vehicle tire with a shotgun. The group think it's just a blown-out tire, so Baby takes Bill, who is Rainn Wilson, to their family's house to get a tow truck. Moments later, Baby's half-brother Rufus picks up the stranded passengers and takes them to the family house. Let's see, the whole entire murder ride kicks ass. Love it so much. It's
Can
so
I ask,
cool.
have you guys been to that kind of an establishment, like a torture
No, I
museum
wish.
or anything like that? They are a lot of fun.
Oh.
Hell yeah.
When I was a kid, my parents took us to Italy, and, well, not my parents, they didn't have the money. My grandparents, when they were, involved in their various fraudulent schemes, they had enough money to take us to Italy. And there were torture museums in every town. Every town had a different torture museum in Italy. And that was a riot. It was so much fun. But the remnants, the cool thing that you can still find here are the weird Ripley's Believe It or Not that are still hiding around the country. And I have to show you guys this because this is my favorite thing ever. In Atlantic City, on the boardwalk, there's a Ripley's Believe It or Not, and they have the Jersey Devil's bones.
Oh, that kicks
Holy
ass.
shit.
Oh, that kicks ass. Look at that guy.
Fucking coolest.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love that side of America, and I just love the idea that he's got a dark ride that they go on with the history of the killings. Like, that is only something that I feel like Rob Zombie could have come up with, because he was making rides for Universal, and he was such a fan of all that tacky kind of, hillbilly side of the road culture and all that. Like, it's just, I do love that part of the movie. I think it's just wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He does experiment, especially with this part of the movie too, with lots of split screens and I mean, it's towards the end of the movie, but there's a split diopter shot, which
it's so good.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think he grows even more talented with his use of camera work in Rejects, but you can see him experimenting with what he wants to toy with in this one, if that makes any sense.
I mean, what's interesting too is like there's like at one point I paused the movie while I was like taking notes, and I think it was like one of the shots where like it just like sort of splices in footage of like the red tinted like like sky and like the dark field and like just like sort of like a person like tilted to the side in the background. I'm just like, it's like I mean, he only holds on that particular shot for like a few seconds. I'm just like, wow, that's an incredible image, just like that I happen to pause on. And I feel like he maybe is like more willing to sit in the images like as like
is it the Oh, go ahead.
No, it's just like I feel like he's like, this is like, I mean, it is like much more frantically paced. I mean, from the get go, where like he's got like the handheld camera, he's like racing towards like the convenience store as it's being robbed and everything. Like, you don't get as many of those kind of like shots. I feel like in Devil's Rejects and everything, which is just, I don't know. Again, it is interesting to see how like it becomes like a little more stripped down.
This one feels more playful, and more like, oh, let's just roll with it. Maybe this will, which I guess does fit the tone of this one a little bit more, even if not everything sticks. If that, I enjoy watching him play in his sandbox, even if he knows which toys he works best with and which ones he'll discard later on.
It's kind of funny to think that he hasn't until The Munsters made a movie with this much of an overt comedic bent to it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I remember reading something where it was just like the script was not this funny, but once he got on set with Sid Haig and whatnot, he was just like, "What am I have to like?
Yeah,
I have him. I have
funny
to."
actors like Sid Haig. I love Sid Haig.
Oh, yeah.
Has everybody here seen The Big Birdcage?
No,
I have not.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all,
we all have
I'm
homework.
honor bound. Yeah, you fucking do. I'm honor bound to say that Jack Hill's best film, I believe, is what is it called? Pit Stop, the racing film from 1969 with Sid Haig. I'm gonna kick myself if that's not the name of the movie. That is the name of the movie. I was right. I win. Pit Stop is Jack Hill's best movie from a stylistic point of view. Jack Hill's most fun movie, the movie that you just want, you like eat it like it's like you're the kids in Jurassic Park coming up to the buffet, is The Big Birdcage. Big Birdcage, semi-sequel to Jack Hill's first Filipino women in prison film, The Big Dollhouse, which is very good but a little sloppy, not unlike House of a Thousand Corpses. The Big Birdcage is the best movie ever made. Sid Haig and Pam Grier are revolutionaries who decide that the best thing to do for their campaign is to break a bunch of female inmates out of a prison being run by a sadistic commandant in the middle of the jungle. And Sid Haig decides that the only way to do this is to go undercover as one of the guards, and the guards are all gay at the camp, and so he flirts with Vic Diaz for a good 25 minutes before the bloodbath at the camp occurs when they show up to try to free everybody. It is the stuff that exploitation dreams are made of. It is the most beautiful movie. Oh my god, what a fucking picture.
Well, I just added that
Oh,
to
this
my...
is cool. We're just going to stop for an hour and a half. Go watch that.
Honestly, I'll wait. I'll watch it with you. I have the box set somewhere.
Oh, man. Yeah, now my next thing is to watch a lot of Jack Hill because I was
gotta
just looking
watch a
through
lot
here
of
and I was
Jack
just
Hill.
like, this looks badass. This looks badass. Hey, this looks badass as well.
Jack Hill was so good that a movie like Switchblade Sisters almost pales in comparison to some of his other movies. Wow. And it's called Switchblade Sisters, and it's about a girl gang, and one of them has an eye patch. Like, it's like that's the coolest thing ever, but it isn't even as good as all the other shit he's done. Like,
yeah,
it's
I've only seen Coffee, Foxy Brown, and Spider Baby, which are all fucking.
I've only
great.
seen Spider
all good.
Baby. Yeah,
all good.
Let's get back to the plot
Please,
here.
sorry.
They meet.
You're fine.
No,
You're...
believe me, this is the best
Yes.
part. The best part is not talking about the movie we're covering. There they meet Baby's family. It says her adopted brother Otis, but I'm pretty sure it's just half brother. Like everybody are like half brothers because
the relationships and names and stuff are all immutable. You know, or mutable rather.
They're their own chosen family and their own.
Exactly.
Yeah. Her brother Otis, her deformed giant half brother Tiny, who kicks ass, Mother Firefly, and Grandpa Hugo, who also kicks ass. While being treated to dinner, Mother Firefly explains that her ex-husband Earl had previously tried to burn Tiny alive along with the Firefly house after he suffered a psychotic breakdown. After dinner, the family puts on a Halloween show for their guests, and Baby offends Mary by flirting with Bill. Just the coolest scene ever. God, it looks so fucking awesome.
I completely forgot about this scene too, and I was just like, I completely forgot there was a Sherry Moon Zombie Marilyn Monroe homage. Like,
it's really a movie about how you have to know how to hang.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to hang, you're gonna fuck the whole night up.
I do love later. It might cut to a little bit later, but when she's like, "Okay, answer my question, and if you get it wrong, you lose." Who's my favorite celebrity?
It's like Marilyn Monroe. No, Betty Davis. You lose.
Yeah. So good.
The fucking best. You talking about their relationship to each other makes me want to get a shirt with Captain Spaulding on it that says, "I'm not the stepfather, I'm the father that stepped up."
Stepped up.
That's incredible.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, and just like the pungent profanity of like the dialogue too. Like, I mean, like the dinner scene where like they're talking about the reporting on like true crime, and I think it's the grandpa says like, "Where are you, Jimmy Olsen, cub reporter for the Daily Asshole?"
Daily Asshole.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
That's one of my. My biggest problem, and I'm sorry to Scout and most of people, but I fucking hate his Halloween movies. And mostly the big, because Charlie, you were saying his biggest deters about his movies are his underdeveloped characters. And I was like, I think it's his dialogue is actually, because
people hate the dialogue.
In here, it's a little much, but still enjoyable. Devil's Rejects, it's starting to teeter, and then by Halloween, I can't stand it.
No, Devil's Rejects, I think he perfects it. I love the dialogue in Devil's
I
Rejects.
I agree with Charlie on that one. There's something to it just matches the tone of that film perfectly. Mm-hmm. Like just them constantly shouting fuck at each other, and just the hideous things that they say to the people that they're about to kill.
Yeah.
I mean, it becomes like a contest almost or something. There's like a carnival game atmosphere to, can we outdo the last horrible thing that you've heard or seen that I really just fucking love? And the thing is, I used to have the same reaction that you do, Kevin, where it's like, I hated all the dialogue. Like when the first time I saw Halloween the first, I was like, what are you fucking doing? You know, like it was because I was so enamored of Halloween 2, which was a much moodier piece all the way around.
Oh yeah.
Going back to the you know, the kind of heat wave profanity of Halloween was like a little bit of regression, but now I've just made peace with it and I can't get enough. And furthermore, by adding actors like Richard Brake down the line who can just chew on all this dialogue like it's the fucking, just like it's a fucking Ruth's Chris meal. I just can't get enough of it. I just can't get enough of it. I know all the objections, and I understand them certainly from tonal and writerly perspective and all that. They are things that should not work, but to me they do. So like,
right.
yeah.
Well, and listening to the commentary, it made me appreciate more of the lines in this that I was just like, because because he was like talking about Otis doing his like little, I don't know, like speeches to the cheerleaders and whatnot. And he says in the commentary, he's just like, yeah, these don't make any sense. He's a fucking idiot. Like none of these are dumb. Like, and I was like, okay, good. I was like, I thought you thought this was like deep
idiot.
stuff. I thought you thought this stuff was like deep because there's this line that I have pulled up here that I always thought was just so fucking ridiculous, but I'll say it and then I'll mention what he says, where he's talking about like, listen, you Malibu middle class Barbie piece of shit, I'm trying to work. You've never worked a day in your life, and I ain't talking about no goddamn White Sox with Mickey Mouse on one side and Donald Duck on the other. And apparently his gym teacher used to say that to everybody at the start of the year, and that's where he got it from. And I was just like, okay. I was just like, yeah. But yeah, stuff like that, that's okay with me. But in like Devil's Rejects, where he's like, I'm Willy Wonka and this is my fucking chocolate.
I love
vat.
that shit.
I hate that line.
I love it. I know. I agree with both what you're saying, Kevin, and what Scout. It's funny because I love this in Devil's Rejects, and then I went to the original Halloween after this one too, and had the same complaint. Maybe we're getting too far ahead, but I still don't love his first Halloween because I feel like that's him. The same thing with the dialogue, but it's him kind of being restrained by the studio system of like, you kind of have to remake the first one. And then
he wanted the first one to all be the first half.
Which I think
which would have been good.
And it's fine. It's fine. And all the backstory about I didn't like the backstory about Michael Myers at first back in the day when it came out. Now I appreciate it more. And then Halloween 2 to me is like Tim Burton's with Batman Returns, where he was just like, I'm gonna go fucking nuts. And then the studio was just like, what are you doing? Like, what have you
done with? Yeah. And it's just everything about it really does feel like a duo. Because you got Brandon Trost shooting it instead of Phil Parman, who was on board for the last two, and just like, it's just so fucking beautiful. I mean, it's Suspiria, basically, where you get so much communicated by the way people are disoriented and scream and hallucinate, and oh my god, what a fucking beautiful piece of work that is. Like, just like pictorially, probably his prettiest film, even though Lords of Salem gives it a run for its money.
Lords of Salem looks great.
Lords of Salem is fucking fantastic.
Who shot Lords of Salem?
Brandon Trost again.
Oh, okay.
Trost,
it looks really good.
Do you know what Trost's last high profile job was as a director of photography?
Well, I know he directed An American Pickle, which is funny to think about.
Which is good.
Oh my god, I forgot that thing even existed. What was that? Like, did that thing come out like 2 months after the pandemic started or something?
Summer 2020, I think. HBO Max.
It was it was an HBO original, and I watched it because Jay Hoberman talked about it. And anytime Jay Hoberman on Jewishness is always a must read. And then I saw Trost directed it, so I was like, yeah, sure, I want to watch this. And it was fucking great. But his Trost's last high-profile job as a director of photography was Dear Evan Hansen.
Now, I saw the trailer for that, and I was like, I'm getting a lot of Halloween 2.
I mean, it is fair to say that you could watch a trailer for Dear Evan Hansen and say that I'm getting a Rob Zombie vibe off of this, because it will also make you.
Way.
I mean, you'll also feel like you're being held down to a chair and had nails driven through your hands.
Okay, real quick. What was the last one? The Halloween show. They fix the car, they leave, but then they actually capture them again. Denise's father is the one who meets up with the deputies to
who is
find
old
their
Private Ryan.
Yeah, it's so weird.
That's wild.
Yeah.
He was also in a terrible Korean kaiju movie from around that same time.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Damn. He was getting some work. Hell yeah. The two deputies, George Wydell and Steve Nash, has an I in there. It's not Nash, but maybe it's Nash. But
Yeah, no, it's Nash, like J. Carroll Nash.
Ah, that's right. They find the couple's abandoned car in a field with a dead, mutilated cheerleader in the trunk. One of the 5 cheerleaders who went missing a week, and the Firefly family has them. Dawn, a former policeman, is called to the scene to help the deputies search. They arrive at the Firefly house, and Wydell questions Mother Firefly about the missing teens. Mother Firefly shoots Wydell in the head and kills him. Dawn and Steve are then killed by Otis when they find more bodies of the missing cheerleaders in the barn. Later that night, the 3 remaining teenagers are dressed as rabbits and take out to an abandoned well. Beautiful scene. Otis torments Denise using the skin of her dead father's face as a mask. Also awesome. I love that. Now ask yourself, who's your daddy? Yeah.
God damn it.
Bill Moseley's so good.
And that's when I texted our Charlie and Kevin. I texted you like him wearing the skin mask looks like the Tim Robinson sketch where he's like, I got all this fucking shit on me.
Yeah, Carl Havoc. Yeah, Carl Havoc. Look at this guy. This guy sucks. Imagine this guy came up to you.
Oh yeah, that scene's so funny.
I'm
the one who delivers the Christmas candy. Bill Moseley's so good in that scene.
He's the first great unself-conscious Rob Zombie performance, I feel. Like, Sid Haig is good, but Sid Haig is a pro, and we know Sid Haig can do this stuff. But Bill Moseley comes alive when Rob Zombie is directing him in a way that I hadn't seen elsewhere.
You didn't see that in Silent Night, Deadly Night 4 or 3 or whatever?
He's good in 3, but he's not off the chain in 3. He's got to give a restrained performance. There's that beautiful scene where the woman cooks him dinner and he sheds a single tear. Incredible stuff. Monty Hellman directed that movie.
What?
Do you not know that? Yeah, that's a great movie.
Two-Lane Blacktop, Monty Hellman?
Two-Lane Blacktop, Monty Hellman directed Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, Better Watch Out. Good movie.
Which one did Brian Usna?
My dear friend Brian Usna. We're not actually friends, but I've interviewed him and he's a nice guy.
Oh yeah.
He did 4. He did Return of the Living Dead 3. He did Reanimator 2, and he did Silent Night, Deadly Night 4. And he also did The Dentist and The Dentist 2.
I've seen those. Oh yeah.
Good movie.
Those were big. Look at this VHS cover. I have to take it home. Meanwhile, Jerry and Denise are placed in a coffin and lowered into a well where a group of Dr. Satan's failed experiments break open the coffin and pull Jerry away. I remember this is the scene they played. This is going to be the most me quote ever, when Rob Zombie was on the new Tom Green show in 2003 and they played this scene and I was just like, this is too fucking scary, dude. I can't watch this. And then I think like the next year I finally watched it. But and then Jerry gets pulled away. He gets experimented on by Dr. Satan while Denise runs around. The worst part about the characters is that Denise is the final girl, but it doesn't even feel that way because it's just so convoluted and I don't know. Whenever
thinking about the movie as a traditional horror movie, I think is probably a mistake because almost none of the beats match. You know, there isn't. You know, there you could argue that any horror movie goes through rising action, period of horror, and then, you know, something even worse happens, and then you walk away. But nothing else about that movie is at all the same kind of a thing. I mean, at most, you could compare it to something like Last House, because Last House was trying to mock the feeling of flipping channels during the Vietnam War. So it's horror, then it's comedy, then it's this, then it's that, and then it's country music, and blah, blah, blah. And the hilarious country music they wrote to be about the plot, I gotta get that.
With the bumbling cops in Last
House.
The
bumbling cops, yes. Who I once heard described as deputy dipshit and sheriff something, or I can't remember. But anyway, yeah.
Yes, and then Jerry's getting experimented on by Dr. Satan. That's where we see Dr. Satan. And then Denise is trying to get out of this underground lair where Dr. Satan orders his mutated gargantuan assistant, which I wish was on my business cards, which turns out to be Mother Firefly's ex-husband Earl, to capture Denise, but she outwits him and gets to leave. She makes her way to the main road where she encounters Captain Spaulding, who gives her a ride in his car. She passes out, and Otis appears from the back seat. Denise later then wakes up to find herself strapped to the operation table, surrounded by Dr. Satan and Earl, who survived the cave-in. The movie ends with Denise screaming in horror in the words "the end" with a question mark displayed before the end credits.
I almost wish, it would have been better if they ended on that freeze frame of Otis rising up from the backseat. That might have been.
I thought they did. I have not seen this.
That would have been a very Friday the 13th ending. But I do like the quick cut to her being on the operating table, and you're just like, oh shit, all of this was for nothing.
But then I feel like the chilling note of it is sort of like, again, kind of muddied by, like, you know, he plays, like, brick house over. I'm like, fuck, all right, I feel like you're kind of taking this thing out of it, for me at least, but, like, you know, subjective, I guess. Yeah.
I think in general he kind of learned his lesson about that, and then I think that he started to take these things more seriously as something other than how do I assault people, how do I make my name, how do I make people aware that I'm doing this, that I'm out there, and be afraid of me. But yeah, no, I think you're right about that. I think that a lot of the big tonal swings kind of go away as he moves on. And I like, too, that he redoes the ending of this in 31, that great, beautiful, extended showdown between Sherry Moon Zombie and Richard Brake to Dream On by Aerosmith.
Yeah.
Really? Oh, boy,
Yeah.
that's going to be interesting.
I also
God,
like that...
I fucking love that scene. Anyway, sorry.
You're just making me... I remember that. I should watch 31 again, because...
31 gets better with every rewatch, I will say.
I mean, that feels like every Rob Zombie movie to me as
you're right.
Like...
Because, like... When you guys asked me if I wanted to be on to talk about these movies, I put on Devils again, and I was like, yeah, this is the best movie I've ever seen. Like, going from kind of begrudgingly respecting it and not really enjoying myself in 2009 when I first saw it, 2010, to it being like, oh, I can watch this anytime. I can watch this night or day of the week, doesn't matter. It's just so comforting to me. I don't like something about his images and the profanity and the violence, the way he does it. I could just always watch it.
I especially get it with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also just think it's funny that in both this and Devil's Rejects, it's like Captain Spaulding's like that member of your capture the flag team that's like, okay, just in case they get away, you're like, you gotta make sure, like, bring them back, like, because both this and
right, because the entire time you're like, oh, he's not involved in any of this.
We're all gonna be,
and then by the end, it's like, oh,
we're gonna be all congregating here, but if you could just like, just hang out on the outer end, like, I do think that
take your beautiful old muscle car out on the road and see if you can find one of our victims escaping.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter at Almost Major to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at Kev Bonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at J Doyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CT Nash91. Once again, thank you for listening.